Um, let's look at averages and weighted averages. Okay, and kind of the differences between them. If you were in class today, we talked about this already. If you weren't in class, you're like, what is he talking about? This is what we talked about if you came to the workshop. If you were working on something else, that's cool. We're kind of covering it again here. But essentially, you know how to take a regular average. Let's say you are looking at, in general, like how, like it's, okay, we're getting close to the fall, right? We're in, early September. But eventually it'll be pumpkin time, and you'll go out to, the local farmer, and you'll start looking at pumpkins. And maybe you're a farmer and you want to figure out what's your average size of pumpkin. Okay, what's the average mass of your pumpkin? So you pick out 20 pumpkins, and you're like, hey, this pumpkin, or maybe just like 4 pumpkins, because 20 is a lot. I don't want to do a lot of work. This pumpkin is 10 kilograms. That's about 22 pounds, by the way. 2.2 pounds-ish per kilogram. You've got another pumpkin here that's like 8 kilograms. You just got big pumpkins. You've got one here that's 6 kilograms, and then one that's like 14 kilograms, right? And to find a traditional average, you simply add up each of these quantities. So 10 plus 8 plus 6 plus 14. And then you would divide by the total number that you have. And since we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you see them here, just 1, 2, 3, 4 distinct objects, we divide by that total amount. So in this case here, we've got 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 14 is 28, plus 10 is 38. 38 divided by 4, oh, what is that, about 9.6? Let's pull out a calculator here. 9.5, okay? So our average here is 9.5 kilograms per pumpkin, okay? And that's how you just take a traditional average. There's nothing crazy there. You simply add the total and divide by the number that you had. When we do weighted averages, though, and hello to everybody in the channel, when we do weighted averages, things get a little bit different. We'll use a calligraphy pen here. Weighted average. Dun, dun, dun. Weighted averages, we need to consider how much of what proportion kind of exists of the quantity. We normally see weighted averages, well, you'll see weighted averages a lot in your classes and how they do grades. D-Gal in the chat could probably tell you that, the way they weight grades in colleges are based off of, 30% will be homework, and that's a class you'll love because you can work hard on the homework and, you can get a lot of that percentage there. But maybe like 50% is test and 20% is quizzes. So if you do really well on the test and quizzes but never do a homework, you can still kind of pass that class. What we're going to look at for weighted averages, though, in terms of what we're doing is via the cow or the pig or the whatever it is you have, because when we start looking at these little critters that we might be taking to Cheplics to knock them off. Whenever you get the meat in the end, you're not just getting a bunch of ground up meat, or you're not just getting chuck. You're not just getting steaks, and you're not just getting ribs. I mean, if a cow was just made of ribs, how would it have legs, right? So we could think that we're getting percentages of each of these. I don't know what these percentages are off the top of my head. This would be a good thing to look up, have your archivist cite, make sure you have this information if you are doing something like this. Maybe you're not. But maybe something like, I don't know, 10% of a cow is steak. Okay, now if you're like Mr. Botzer, there's a lot of different types of steak here. Are we doing a sirloin, a T-bone, a strip steak, what filet, cowboy, like what? Okay, well, you could get into a weighted average of this weight and figure that out, whatever. But let's just say 10% steak. Let's just say 50% chuck, just like kind of ground up meat. So we're at 60% now. Let's say that 30% 39% of it is, what's something else that could exist for a cow? I don't know. Let's make it like fat. Like cows are just really fat, and you don't actually eat it, but it's there, and we're stuck with it. And that brings us to 99%, and we'll say like 1% of the cow is my personal favorite, ribs. That is a good-looking R. Look at that. It's a good-looking R. Anyways, now for each of these parts here, we could say that steak, chuck, fat, and ribs all have a different cost associated with them. You know, maybe steak is something like it's $8 per pound of steak, and maybe chuck is like $2 a pound. Maybe fat, maybe it has some use to it. Maybe fat's like, you could mill it up or weave it into something. I don't know what you do with fat, but let's say it's like next to nothing. Let's just say it's like $0.1, so it's like 10 cents a pound. Someone out there is buying fat, and let's say ribs, my favorite thing, right? They know they can mark up ribs on me. Let's say ribs are like $20 a pound. Now, if we did just a traditional average here, and we can't do that, but let's see what would happen if we did a traditional and why it would be wrong. If we did a traditional average, you might think to go 20 plus 0.1 plus 2 plus 8, because those are the 4 costs that we have. And then we could divide that by 4. And if we did that, we'd get 30.1 divided by 4, which gives us something a little bit more than 7. Let's see, 30.1 divided by 4, 7.5. And we'd find that it would be about $7.50 a pound. This is wrong. This right here is not how you do things for a weighted average. So don't do it like that. We're going to see here that we should get some different answer here due to the weights. What we have to do for a weighted average is we need to consider each of these weights into the calculation. Yeah, it's $8 for a pound of steak, but whenever you butcher your cow, you're not just getting steak there. Only 10% or 0.1 of the cow is steak. Remember, whenever you have a percentage, that means that this decimal bounces over twice. Okay? So in order to figure out these percentages, we need to do this. We need to say, okay, if 10% or 0.1 of the cow is steak, and it costs $8 per pound, we can add that amount to the next piece. Because really, we're only getting 10% of that steak amount. If a pound of steak is $8, we're really only pulling 10% of it because the entire cow isn't made of steak. Only 10% of it is. Same idea with the chuck. We can take the chuck, 50%, 0.5, and we can multiply it times the cost of the chuck. Oh, what happened there? We clicked something. The cost of the chuck here is $2 a pound. If we continue this, we can say plus the fat. There's 39% of our cow is fat, as we see right there, and it's coming in at $0.1 per pound. So this is like $0.1 per pound. And last but not least, my favorite, only 1% we're saying of the cow is ribs. Now, I don't know if that value is right, but let's just go with it. So 0.01 of the cow is ribs, and we have ribs marked at a value of $20 a pound. So $20 per pound. Okay? So we have this very long setup here of all the things we've got in our equation. And if we go through this, we can calculate all of this here. If we do 0.1 times 8, we end up getting 0.8 dollars per pound plus 0.5 times 2, that's like 2 divided by 2, which is $1 per pound, plus 0.39 times 0.1. Because we're multiplying two decimals, we know this is going to get smaller. Since this is multiplying by 0.1, it's like a decimal shifts one place. So this is 0.039. And then plus 1% of 20, well, that's 2 for the decimal there. That's 2 for the decimal there. So that's just 0.2. Now, traditionally for an average, we still have to divide by something, okay? But if we add up all of the percentages, 10%, 50%, 39%, 100 or 1% there, and they add them all up to 100%, you've just added up to 1. If you take all the pieces of the cow and put them together, you have 1 cow. So what you're really doing here is you have all of this dollar per pound amount per 1 cow. And if you're dividing by 1, you're not really doing anything here in this weighted average. We'll see later on in the year, we'll start doing weighted averages if we're doing like time averages for like velocities, which are a little bit different setup. But for right now, like with what we have in this weight, you're just dividing by the entirety of the grade, which is just a cow here. So all we need to do is add up all of our purple values. We've got 1 plus 0.8 plus 0.039 plus 0.2. Well, 1 plus 0.8 is 1.8 plus 0.2 is 2. So we really see that the cost of our cow is $2.039 per pound, which if we go back to what we had before, to this 7.5, 2.039 isn't 7.5. If we think about this, most of our cow was in the chuck at $2. The other large portion of our cow was only worth 10 cents. Only a small portion, the steak and the ribs, was worth any more. So because of that, we know that our price is going to hover probably somewhere around that $2 mark, just because most of it is that chuck. And boom, there we have it. $2 and 3 to 4 cents for a pound of this meat. If you want to figure out then, you know, if I know how much on average the meat costs from my cow, and I want to figure out how much my cow is worth, well, $2 and 3 9/10 cents for a pound times however much your cow weighs. I don't know how much a cow weighs. Very honest with you, chat. I know next to nothing about barn animals. The only experience I have with them is, remember that little like circular game and it had the little like lever on the side. It was orange and you pulled it down and it spun, and then it was like the pig goes oink, oink, oink. And then it was like the cow goes moo. And it was like the duck goes quack, quack, quack. But like the edition I got was a little bit messed up with the sound card. So it was like, and the duck goes bah. And I had a hard time with my animals because of that. Anywho, let's just say a cow weighs 2,000 pounds. I don't know how much a cow weighs, but let's just say it is. We see now that our pounds cancel out, and we can see that our cow is going to cost somewhere on the order of $4,000 and $4,078.00. Okay? So that's how much you can figure out how much a cow is depending on that. And then you can do something similar, you know, doing your grocery store purchases or whatnot and what you've spent there. So that's how we can do a weighted average here. It's a little different than a traditional average. You're not just dividing by a number. You need to multiply these weights, which we had for each of our different materials. And then you need to divide by this total amount. And in our case, it was just 1 because we're looking at 1 cow there. Okay, so a little different than what you're used to, but on the whole, it is still just adding and multiplication and division. You can do that. The only kind of tricky part is at the end recognizing that, you know, to get the price of your cow, you need to do a little bit of unit conversion, train tracks, railroads, dimensional analysis, whatever you like to call it, to get the actual price of your animal. Okay? So that is that. Weighted averages are now finished. Yeah, and decal, let's just go back and appreciate this right here. Look at this letter R. You know what? This is such a good letter R. We may need to grab something real quick.